Freedom of choice is one of the most celebrated ideals of the modern world. But let me ask you, has freedom of choice truly made us happier? Everywhere we look, we're surrounded by choices. From what to eat, what to wear, and where to live, to decisions as complex as choosing a career or a life partner, modern life constantly tells us that having more options equals greater happiness. But is that really true? Think about it. When was the last time you made a decision and felt genuinely satisfied with your choice? Maybe it was scrolling through hundreds of movies on a streaming platform, only to give up and pick something random. Or perhaps it was choosing from dozens of career opportunities, only to later question if you made the right decision. The truth is, we often find ourselves overwhelmed by the abundance of choices, which leads to stress, indecision, and even regret. This is the paradox of our time. The more choices we have, the more difficult it becomes to feel happy or content. Psychologists call it the paradox of choice, and it has a profound effect on how we navigate our lives. But today, we're not just exploring this from a psychological perspective. We'll dive deeper into the roots of freedom of choice through the lens of philosophy, religion, and modern science. We'll explore the insights of 5 great philosophers: Aristotle, Spinoza, Sartre, Nietzsche, and Kant, each of whom tackled the complex relationship between freedom, responsibility, and happiness. Then we'll look at religious perspectives and the eternal debate. Do we truly have free will, or is everything in our lives predetermined by a higher power? By the end of this journey, we'll return to the original question: has freedom of choice truly made us happier? And more importantly, if it hasn't, what does that mean for the way we live our lives and perceive our freedom? So let's begin this exploration of one of life's most fundamental questions and see if we can uncover the truth behind the choices we make every day. Freedom of choice is often seen as the hallmark of personal liberty, a fundamental right that allows individuals to navigate their own paths in life. But what truly distinguishes meaningful, happiness-inducing choices from superficial ones? To understand this, we must go beyond the surface-level understanding of choice as simply the availability of options. Real freedom of choice lies in the alignment of our decisions with our personal values, goals, and needs. It requires not just the ability to choose, but also the capacity to understand what we genuinely desire. This alignment is what makes a choice fulfilling and, ultimately, happiness-inducing. For example, a person who chooses a career based on their passion and strengths is more likely to find joy and purpose in their work than someone who simply picks the highest-paying job. In relationships, choosing a partner who aligns with one's values and aspirations fosters long-term satisfaction, while superficial choices based on appearance or societal pressure often lead to dissatisfaction. Real freedom of choice is not about the number of options available, but the relevance and authenticity of those options. This is why minimalists often report higher levels of happiness despite intentionally limiting their choices. They focus on what truly matters to them. The illusion of freedom and its dangers. Superficial or illusory freedom of choice occurs when our decisions are driven by external influences rather than internal clarity. This happens when choices are manipulated by marketing and consumerism. Advertisers craft messages that make us believe we need certain products to be happy or successful. Social norms and peer pressure. People often make choices to fit in or conform to societal expectations, even if those choices contradict their true desires. Cultural conditioning. In some cultures, the concept of choice is deeply tied to tradition, leaving little room for genuine individual expression. These false freedoms often create a sense of dissatisfaction or regret because the choices made do not reflect the individual's true self. For instance, a person who buys an expensive gadget due to marketing pressure may experience a fleeting sense of joy, only to later feel regret over the unnecessary expense. Someone who follows a career path dictated by family expectations may achieve external success but feel unfulfilled internally. Components of genuine freedom of choice. To ensure our choices contribute to happiness rather than stress or regret, they must meet these key criteria. 1. Self-awareness. Understanding your values, needs, and priorities is essential to making meaningful decisions. 2. Informed decision-making. Access to accurate and unbiased information allows individuals to evaluate options critically. 3. Autonomy. True freedom of choice requires the absence of external coercion or manipulation. 4. Balance of options. While having options is important, too many can overwhelm us. Striking a balance helps reduce decision fatigue. The role of emotional and cognitive balance. Research shows that happiness from choices often depends on how we perceive the process of decision-making. People who focus on intrinsic rewards, like personal growth or emotional fulfillment, report greater satisfaction compared to those who base their decisions on extrinsic factors, such as status or material gain. For example, a student choosing a field of study they are passionate about is likely to enjoy the learning process and excel, even if the career prospects are not as lucrative. In contrast, when choices are made under pressure or without emotional clarity, they can lead to stress and dissatisfaction. This highlights the importance of reflection and mindfulness in the decision-making process. Why more choices don't always mean more freedom. While modern societies often equate the abundance of options with greater freedom, studies suggest otherwise. The paradox of choice reveals that an excess of options can lead to decision paralysis. Too many choices can overwhelm individuals, making it difficult to decide. Regret. When faced with numerous options, people often second-guess their decisions, wondering if they missed a better opportunity. Decreased satisfaction. Even after making a choice, people may feel less satisfied, believing they could have chosen better. This paradox highlights that true freedom of choice is not about having endless options, but about having meaningful and manageable ones. Freedom of choice in practice. True freedom of choice often manifests in small, deliberate decisions that align with one's core values. For example, choosing to spend time with loved ones instead of working overtime aligns with the value of prioritizing relationships. Opting for a sustainable product over a cheaper alternative reflects a commitment to environmental responsibility. These decisions, though seemingly simple, bring deeper satisfaction because they resonate with the individual's sense of purpose and identity. In the end, freedom of choice is not about how much we can choose, but how well we choose. It's about filtering through the noise of societal expectations and external pressures to make decisions that truly reflect who we are. This is the kind of freedom that brings happiness, not fleeting or shallow joy, but a deep, lasting contentment that comes from living authentically. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, offers a timeless perspective on freedom of choice through the lens of virtue ethics. For Aristotle, true freedom lies in the ability to make rational choices that align with one's virtues and lead to eudaimonia, a state of flourishing and fulfillment. According to him, a free choice is not merely about selecting among available options, but about making the right choice in accordance with reason and moral virtue. Aristotle believed that humans are distinguished by their capacity for rationality. This rationality guides individuals to deliberate and choose actions that align with their values and goals. Freedom, in this sense, is not an absence of constraints, but the ability to reason and act in ways that promote personal and communal well-being. For example, Aristotle argued that courage, as a virtue, lies between the extremes of recklessness and cowardice. A person faced with danger can choose to act courageously by using reason to assess the situation, balancing fear and confidence. Such a choice is both free and virtuous. Aristotle emphasized that freedom of choice requires the cultivation of good habits and education. People must learn to desire what is truly good and develop the ability to act on these desires. Without this moral and intellectual training, individuals may be enslaved by their passions or ignorance, making choices that lead to harm rather than happiness. For instance, an uneducated person might choose immediate pleasure, like overindulging in food or drink, without considering the long-term consequences. In contrast, someone who has cultivated temperance can freely choose moderation, leading to better health and greater satisfaction over time. Aristotle also highlighted the importance of societal structures in enabling freedom. He believed that a just society provides its citizens with the education and opportunities necessary to make virtuous choices. Without these, individuals may lack the capacity to act freely. This idea underscores the interplay between personal freedom and collective responsibility. In the modern context, Aristotle's philosophy challenges the notion that freedom is about having limitless options. Instead, it emphasizes that true freedom involves making thoughtful, virtuous choices that contribute to a meaningful life. For example, in a consumer-driven society, Aristotle would argue that freedom is not about buying more, but about choosing wisely based on what aligns with one's values and well-being. Baruch Spinoza, a 17th-century Dutch philosopher, presents a radically different perspective on freedom. For Spinoza, freedom is not about escaping necessity, but understanding it. In his view, the universe operates according to immutable laws of nature, and human choices are no exception. True freedom, therefore, lies in recognizing these laws and aligning oneself with them. Spinoza argued that what we perceive as free will is often an illusion. Our choices are influenced by internal and external causes, many of which we are unaware of. For instance, a person might believe they freely chose to eat a particular food, but their decision may have been shaped by biological hunger, cultural norms, or advertising. Despite this deterministic view, Spinoza believed that humans could achieve freedom by gaining knowledge. Understanding the causes behind one's desires and actions allows individuals to act more consciously and rationally. This self-awareness enables a person to transcend immediate impulses and make choices aligned with their true nature. For example, a person who understands that their anger is triggered by insecurity can choose to address the underlying issue rather than act out impulsively. In this sense, knowledge transforms necessity into freedom. Spinoza also connected freedom to ethical living. He argued that the highest form of freedom is living in accordance with reason and striving for intellectual and emotional clarity. Such a life leads to greater peace and happiness, as individuals are no longer enslaved by passions or external influences. Spinoza's insights remain relevant in a world dominated by technology and advertising. By understanding how these forces shape our desires, we can regain a sense of agency. For instance, recognizing how social media algorithms influence our choices can help us make more intentional and authentic decisions. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, took freedom to its existential extreme. According to Sartre, humans are condemned to be free, meaning that we are always responsible for our choices, even in the absence of clear guidance. This radical freedom is both liberating and burdensome. Sartre argued that with freedom comes responsibility. Every choice we make defines who we are, and we cannot escape this responsibility by blaming others or external circumstances. For instance, a person who stays in an unfulfilling job cannot claim they had no choice. According to Sartre, they are choosing to stay by not acting otherwise. Sartre introduced the concept of bad faith to describe the denial of one's freedom. Bad faith occurs when individuals deceive themselves into believing they are not free, often to avoid the anxiety that comes with making difficult choices. For example, someone might say, "I have no choice but to follow societal norms," when in reality, they fear the consequences of defying them. Sartre believed that true freedom involves living authentically, which means embracing one's freedom and making choices that reflect one's genuine self. This requires courage and self-awareness, as authenticity often involves challenging societal expectations. In today's world, Sartre's philosophy encourages us to confront the discomfort of freedom and take ownership of our lives. Whether it's pursuing a dream or standing up for one's beliefs, Sartre reminds us that freedom is not just a right, but a responsibility. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most provocative philosophers of the 19th century, viewed freedom of choice not as a passive ability, but as an active expression of the will to power. For Nietzsche, true freedom comes from the ability to transcend societal norms and limitations, asserting one's individuality and creativity in life. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power is central to his philosophy. He argued that every living being strives not just for survival, but for growth, self-expression, and dominance over their circumstances. True freedom, in Nietzsche's eyes, is the ability to align one's choices with this innate drive for self-overcoming. For example, consider an artist who chooses to break away from traditional styles to create something entirely new. This act of defiance and creativity is a demonstration of the will to power, an expression of their unique vision and individuality. Nietzsche was deeply critical of societal norms and values, which he referred to as the herd mentality. He believed that most people conform to these norms out of fear, comfort, or habit, which stifles their freedom and creativity. According to Nietzsche, choosing to follow the crowd is not true freedom. It is a form of slavery to societal expectations. For instance, someone who chooses a safe career path because it is socially accepted may feel secure, but lacks the freedom to explore their true potential. Nietzsche urged individuals to break free from these constraints and create their own values. Nietzsche introduced the concept of the Übermensch, or overman, as an ideal of self-mastery and creative freedom. The Übermensch is someone who takes full responsibility for their choices, creates their own values, and lives authentically. This individual transcends traditional notions of good and evil, choosing instead to live according to their own principles. In modern terms, the Übermensch could be seen in individuals who challenge conventions, innovate boldly, and inspire others to think differently. Entrepreneurs, artists, and thinkers who redefine their fields embody this spirit of freedom and creativity. Freedom as a burden and opportunity. Nietzsche acknowledged that true freedom comes with a cost. It requires courage, effort, and a willingness to face uncertainty. However, he believed that embracing this burden is essential for personal growth and fulfillment. For example, someone who chooses to leave a secure but uninspiring job to pursue their passion faces challenges, but also gains the freedom to live authentically. This choice reflects Nietzsche's idea that freedom is not about avoiding struggle, but about embracing it as a path to self-overcoming. Nietzsche's relevance today. In a world where conformity is often rewarded, Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to question whether our choices are truly our own. Are we living according to our values, or are we simply following the herd? By embracing the will to power, we can reclaim our freedom and create a life of purpose and meaning. Immanuel Kant, an 18th century German philosopher, offered a highly influential perspective on freedom of choice. For Kant, true freedom lies in moral autonomy, the ability to act according to one's own rational principles rather than external influences or personal desires. Freedom as autonomy. Kant distinguished between two types of freedom: negative freedom and positive freedom. Negative freedom, the absence of external constraints. Positive freedom, the ability to act in accordance with rational moral laws that one gives to oneself. True freedom, according to Kant, is positive freedom. It is not about doing whatever one pleases, but about acting in ways that reflect universal moral principles. For example, a person who chooses to help others, not out of compulsion or self-interest, but because they recognize it as a moral duty, is exercising true freedom. Kant's moral philosophy is centered on the categorical imperative, a universal principle that guides moral action. It states, "Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law." In other words, before making a choice, one should consider whether the action would be acceptable if everyone else acted in the same way. This principle ensures that freedom is exercised responsibly and ethically. For example, a person who chooses honesty over deception, even when lying might offer personal gain, is acting out of respect for moral law and exercising freedom in its truest sense. Freedom and duty. Kant believed that freedom is inseparable from duty. While this might seem paradoxical, he argued that moral duties do not constrain freedom. They enhance it by aligning actions with reason and universal principles. This view challenges the idea that freedom is about following one's desires. Instead, it is about transcending them to act ethically. For instance, a parent who sacrifices personal leisure to care for their child is fulfilling a moral duty. While this choice involves personal effort, it reflects true freedom because it is guided by rational and ethical considerations. Kant's philosophy is particularly relevant in today's complex world, where individuals often face conflicting choices. His emphasis on rationality and universal principles provides a framework for making ethical decisions in personal, professional, and societal contexts. For example, in a business setting, Kant's philosophy would encourage leaders to prioritize fairness and honesty over short-term profit. By doing so, they exercise freedom that respects both individual autonomy and collective well-being. The balance of freedom and responsibility. Kant's philosophy reminds us that freedom is not an end in itself, but a means to achieve ethical and rational living. By exercising moral autonomy, individuals can make choices that not only benefit themselves, but also contribute to a just and harmonious society. The concept of freedom of choice is a cornerstone of many religious traditions, often tied to humanity's moral responsibility and relationship with a higher power. While religions acknowledge human agency, they also grapple with the tension between free will and divine will. This section explores how major religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, address this profound question, shedding light on whether freedom of choice truly exists within a divine framework and how it influences human happiness. Christianity, Free Will and Divine Sovereignty, 1,000 words. The gift of free will. In Christianity, free will is often seen as a divine gift that enables humans to choose between good and evil. The Bible presents numerous examples where individuals exercise their freedom, such as Adam and Eve's choice in the Garden of Eden. Their decision to eat the forbidden fruit symbolizes humanity's ability and responsibility to make moral choices. The role of divine sovereignty. Christian theology also emphasizes God's omniscience and omnipotence, which raises the question, if God knows everything, including the future, are humans truly free? This paradox has been the subject of theological debate for centuries. St. Augustine, for instance, argued that God's foreknowledge does not negate human freedom, as God knows what choices individuals will freely make. Free will and salvation. Freedom of choice plays a central role in the Christian understanding of salvation. Individuals are called to freely accept God's grace and follow Christ's teachings. This voluntary act of faith is seen as a reflection of true freedom, choosing to align one's will with God's. Freedom and happiness in Christianity. Christianity links freedom of choice to ultimate happiness, which comes from living in accordance with God's will. True freedom, according to Christian thought, is not about pursuing worldly desires, but about choosing a life of virtue and devotion. For example, a person who forgives rather than seeks revenge experiences inner peace and spiritual joy, reflecting the happiness that stems from moral choices. The concept of free will in Islam. In Islam, human beings are granted free will to make choices, yet their lives unfold according to Allah's divine plan. The Quran states, "Indeed, Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves." 13:11. Emphasizing human agency and responsibility. Al-Qadr, the divine decree. The doctrine of Al-Qadr, divine predestination, introduces a nuanced perspective. While Allah has foreknowledge of all events and outcomes, humans are still accountable for their actions. This balance between free will and predestination is likened to a ship navigating a predetermined course where the captain has the freedom to make decisions within set boundaries. Moral responsibility and freedom. Islamic teachings stress that individuals are morally responsible for their choices, which are weighed on the Day of Judgment. Acts of worship, charity, and ethical behavior are seen as conscious choices that reflect true freedom. For instance, fasting during Ramadan is a deliberate act of self-discipline that demonstrates the power of free will in aligning with spiritual goals. Freedom and inner peace in Islam. True freedom in Islam is achieved through submission to Allah's will. This submission is not seen as a loss of freedom, but as a liberation from worldly attachments and selfish desires. A believer who chooses to follow the path of righteousness experiences inner peace and spiritual fulfillment, which are essential components of happiness. Judaism places great emphasis on free will, viewing it as a fundamental aspect of human dignity. The Torah frequently presents individuals with moral choices, urging them to choose life and righteousness. For example, Deuteronomy 30:19 declares, "I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live." While Judaism affirms human freedom, it also acknowledges God's sovereignty. The story of Pharaoh in Exodus illustrates this tension. Initially, Pharaoh hardens his own heart, but later, God hardens it, raising questions about the extent of his free will. Jewish scholars interpret this as a lesson about the consequences of persistent wrongdoing, which can diminish one's capacity for free choice. In Judaism, true freedom is found in following God's commandments, mitzvot. These laws are not seen as restrictions, but as guidelines that lead to a meaningful and ethical life. For example, observing the Sabbath is a deliberate choice to prioritize spirituality and community over material pursuits, fostering a sense of balance and fulfillment. Judaism teaches that happiness arises from making choices that align with divine values and contribute to the well-being of others. Acts of kindness, charity, and justice are seen as expressions of true freedom that bring joy and purpose to life. Shared themes across religions: freedom as responsibility. All three religions emphasize that freedom of choice comes with responsibility. Whether it is following God's commandments, pursuing virtue, or submitting to divine will, freedom is not about selfish indulgence, but about making choices that align with higher principles. The paradox of freedom and submission. Interestingly, all three traditions highlight a paradox. True freedom is found in submission. By choosing to align one's will with divine values, individuals transcend their limitations and experience a deeper sense of liberation and happiness. The role of faith in happiness. Religions connect freedom of choice to spiritual happiness, which is achieved through faith, moral action, and a sense of purpose. For believers, making the right choice is not just a matter of personal fulfillment, but a way to strengthen their relationship with God. As we've seen, religions offer profound insights into the nature of freedom of choice, showing how it shapes our moral responsibility and spiritual happiness. But what does this mean for us today, in a world where choices seem endless and often overwhelming? Let's bring everything together and reflect on the true essence of freedom in our conclusion. Throughout this exploration, we've questioned what freedom of choice truly means and whether it brings us happiness. We've delved into the insights of philosophy, religion, and psychology, uncovering a recurring theme. True freedom is not simply about the ability to choose. It's about the depth, intention, and alignment behind our choices. In today's world, the abundance of choices often creates the illusion of freedom. We're bombarded with decisions every moment: what to buy, where to go, and who to become. Yet, this freedom can feel hollow if it's driven by societal expectations, marketing tactics, or fleeting desires. The freedom to endlessly scroll through options on a streaming platform or to compare our lives to others on social media is not liberating, it's exhausting. True freedom is not about having more options, it's about having meaningful options. A person who knows their values, understands their purpose, and acts with intention experiences a freedom that is both empowering and fulfilling. The power of responsibility. As philosophers like Sartre and Kant reminded us, freedom is inseparable from responsibility. Every choice we make defines who we are and shapes our future. This can feel overwhelming, but it's also a gift, a chance to take control of our lives and live authentically. Instead of blaming external forces for our circumstances, we can embrace our power to choose with courage and clarity. Think about your own life. Are you making choices that reflect your true self, or are you conforming to what others expect? Are you pursuing goals that genuinely matter to you, or are you chasing superficial rewards? These are the questions that define our freedom and ultimately our happiness. Freedom and happiness. Happiness is not found in the act of choosing itself, but in the outcomes and the alignment of those choices with our deeper values. A choice made with awareness and purpose, even if it's difficult, brings a sense of fulfillment and peace. For example, choosing to prioritize relationships over material success or to stand by one's principles in the face of adversity may require sacrifice, but it also creates lasting joy. Religions, too, teach us that freedom is not about rejecting constraints, but about choosing the right constraints, those that lead to a virtuous, ethical, and meaningful life. Whether it's following God's commandments, acting in accordance with reason, or striving for personal growth, true freedom is about transcending selfish desires and connecting with something greater. So what does this mean for you? It's simple. Take a moment to reflect on your choices. Are they truly your own, or are they shaped by external forces? Are they leading you toward happiness, or are they adding to your stress and dissatisfaction? The power to change lies within you. At FactUp, we believe that understanding freedom of choice is the first step toward living a more meaningful and authentic life. If this discussion has resonated with you, join us on this journey. Subscribe to our channel, share this message, and support us in exploring the questions that matter most. Together, we can uncover the truths that shape our world and our lives. Because freedom isn't just about choosing, it's about choosing wisely. And that choice starts now.